You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining me this morning in another edition of Inside Automotive right here at CBT News. The uncertain tariff situation is making waves in the automotive industry, as you know. Joining us today to share his perspective on it and what might lie ahead is Tom Maoli. You've seen him here before on CBT News. He's the president and CEO of Celebrity Motor Car out of New Jersey. So Tom, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Before we get into all of the things that we want to talk to you about today, tariffs being one of them, how's business at your stores?
Business is strong. People are coming in. I think they're concerned about the tariffs, so they're trying to buy the. It's the frenzy before the
Wow.
the
Okay.
increase. Yeah. So, we're selling cars. Used cars pricing has been very strong and stable. And service departments are booming. So, yeah, it's all around the board. It's pretty good. I think the consumer is very concerned about the tariffs.
Yeah.
And so are we as dealers.
Yeah. So kind of unintended consequences there, right? I mean, people are thinking I might be able to save 25% if I buy now before April 2nd.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And listen, we've talked about this before. They're still dealing with the COVID issues and the price increases and inflation. So if these tariffs hit, which I think the president Trump needs to reconsider his position.
Mm-hmm.
But if they do hit, I think it's going to be it's going to be an impact on not only just the auto industry, all industries, but obviously we're on this talking about autos. It's going to be an impact on the auto industry.
Right. And I know that you are a close friend of President Trump's. You do feel as though he should recoil his decision on tariffs?
Yeah, listen, I think he should reconsider his position. I think that the way to get manufacturing moving in the U.S. is not with a stick, but you do it with a carrot and give them tax incentives.
Yeah, for sure. And now we're seeing automakers like Hyundai announcing a $21 billion investment in the U.S. Of course, they were in the White House, and Donald Trump was kind of taking a victory lap with that. That's good news, right? I mean, it looks like they, maybe the threat of tariffs is working with some of these manufacturers.
Yeah, listen, but the question is, what's the cost? What's it going to cost to manufacture these vehicles in the U.S. and put them out to the marketplace?
Right. Yeah, there's no question about it. There are reports that Donald Trump's administration is likely to exclude a sector-specific tariffs on the auto industry and kind of say, all right, we're going to put it on everything else, but not autos. Obviously, you're a fan of that. Other products, just not autos.
Well, listen, I think it has to get done. Autos, transportation is a big part of our economy, and he can't stop transportation. And I think he realizes that the auto industry is a big part of the GDP, and I think he's got to be very careful when what he does here.
Yeah. What are some of the things that concern you? Here we are in the end of the first quarter of 2025. Any concerns that you got outside of what's happening in D.C. for the auto industry as we go into the second quarter of this year?
Well, listen, I think, some of the big concerns were still out there with the electric cars. In fact, I just had an event last night, a fundraiser at my house for Jack Ciattarelli for governor of New Jersey. And, if we don't get a Republican governor, we're going to be left to deal with these CARB laws that are still in place while the president is out there, getting rid of the mandates on a national level. We still have the local CARB laws and the California laws that we have to deal with. And that's going to be a big issue.
Right.
And add to it the tariffs. I think the electric car thing is fizzling, and I think you see it with Tesla. Tesla's getting slammed. Their stock is getting slammed, and all across the board, Rivian's getting slammed. It's not sustainable. It's a viable product, but it's not sustainable to the levels that the government was trying to push it. So that's a concern out there. Mm-hmm. And, listen, manufacturers, dealers, we've all spent a lot of money trying to build this infrastructure to support what the government came up with. And we're not going to get a return on the investment. In fact, we're going to lose our shirts on it. But that's okay. If we can move forward, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
I think one of the keys is I think the manufacturers, and hopefully they don't lose sight of this, but I think they have it right this time, is to keep inventory levels low and supply and demand, and and they're doing it. And I think if they start flooding the market with inventory, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah, I would agree. And there's, of course, the threat of these China vehicles out there. We've had Michael Dunn on the show a number of times. He's a kind of the foremost authority in the country on all things automotive in China. And he says we're on an island out here in North America between Canada and the U.S. Everywhere else, China is pumping in these EVs and their products. What's your take on that?
Well, listen, I think he's right, and I think that we have the right man in the White House to stop that, and I think he's going to stop it. He's not going to let that happen, in the U.S. market. But it's the concern that is what happens down the road, right? Is you always have to look ahead, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. What happens down the road when President Trump's not in the office anymore? And, does China infiltrate our market? If they do, it's going to be devastating for the U.S. auto industry. Yeah,
right. And you not only have the imports, but also your daughter. I know we've had her on a number of times. And talk to me about your Ford store. How's that going?
It's going great. Business is good, but I think that it's a concern, more of a concern in the Ford store, because the consumers can't. There's no way that consumer who is middle class, working class consumer can afford another price increase. They just can't do it. They can't take it.
That's right.
And what's happening also is when you look at stores like when you look at companies like Ford and Chrysler and the lower end of the marketplace, consumers start looking elsewhere to repair their cars. If they can't afford to go back to the dealer because the prices of these parts have skyrocketed, they're going to go to places like quick lube shops to get their oil changes done, and those parts are being bought from China. They're when they put the brake pads on, the consumer's not thinking about the fact that brake pad may only last 10,000 miles when a certified manufacturer brake pad will last 25,000 miles.
Right.
But what they're doing is it's an immediate fix to a cost savings.
Yeah, right. Plus, you don't have a factory trained technician working on your car. You got some kind of a grease monkey doing work and.
Yeah, and in the end, when you go to sell the car and you look at the history of the service records in it, it's not there. But the consumer, when the consumer's making that purchase, they're not thinking about that. What they're thinking about is what's it costing me today, and how am I going to put food on the table?
That's right. Anything that keeps you up at night right now that concerns you about the industry?
No, listen, I think we're in a good position. I think that the tariffs definitely will hurt. But again, I continue to say you can't stop transportation. People need vehicles. They're gonna buy. They're gonna fix. If they're not buying, they're fixing. And if they're not fixing, they're buying.
Right.
So I think the market will stay strong.
Yeah.
I think look at what's going on in the buy-sell market. It's insane. Publics are buying up dealerships like they're candy bars.
That's right.
And I think that, the return on the investment in this business is still there. I think we just need to be I think the president needs to be very careful. That's right.
And you're right. The publics are out there with their checkbook open and want to acquire stores. Do you get that phone call from brokers and reps that say, hey, you're ready to sell? We'd love to get your stores.
At least once a week, and I tell them, what, let's reverse that, and I'm in a buying mode. I want to buy more stores. I think the industry's strong. I think that the franchise laws are in place. Again, what keeps me up at night are the CARB laws and the California laws, and we need to deal with those at a state level, and we're working on it.
Yeah, and your candidate there that you held a fundraiser for, he would repeal those laws?
His first executive order is to repeal those laws immediately. He said it last night. He's not going to tell the consumers what ovens and stoves to buy, where what cars they have to drive.
Right.
It's a consumer's choice. It's their money.
Sure.
And it's even deeper than that. The infrastructure is not there.
I know.
If the government ever pushes this, we're going to have an economic collapse in this state.
Yeah. It's a very scary situation, to say the least. Well, let's hope that your candidate wins. So, Tom Maoli, President and CEO of Celebrity Motorcar, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to join us. So it's always great catching up.
Always great to see you.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick. your #1 resource for auto industry news and content.